Hello students, this is your Pakistan Studies teacher Syed Abbas Mehdi. Today I'm going to be covering lecture number 5, Historical Perspective, Land and People. And I'll cover the first part, which is Advent of Muslims in the subcontinent. This lecture was actually supposed to be covered in the third week of class, but unfortunately because I fell ill, I couldn't do a voiceover the presentation. So today I'm going to make it a comparatively short lecture as compared to my other lectures and try to cover how Muslims made their way into the subcontinent. Just to give a little bit of backdrop, basically Islam entered India from the Southeast Asian coastal areas of Malabar, Konkan and Gujarat. That was the first contact Indians had with Arabs. Then I'm going to be covering how there was actually a military invasion of Sindh and Makran that was ordered a little bit later, and that was the second route of the Islamic entry into South Asia. The third entry, which I will not be covering but you should know, is that Islam also made its way into northwestern India from Central Asia in the 11th and 12th centuries. Since we're going to be covering the advent of Muslims, the first contact that they made with Indians, so I'm going to be basically focusing on South India and southwestern India, that is Sindh and Makkah. In the background, uh, you'll notice that there is a map showing much of North Africa, Middle East, and South Asia. And if you look a little bit closer, you'll notice that the names that are given here are some of the older names of these regions based on the tribes that were living here. So this map is a cartographical map made by the Greeks. And this is probably made in the BCs before Christ or before the Common Era, somewhere around 2nd century to 1st century BCE, before the Common Era, made by Greek cartographers. And you'll notice here that the region where we live, Sindh, is part of the region called Scythia, Scythra. Now the Scythians were a tribe that descended into South Asia, particularly Sindh and Balochistan and parts of Punjab from Central Asia. They made their way here from Central Asia, and they were militarily very successful, and they defeated the Bactrian Greek kingdoms that were here in the BCs, 2nd century BC. And Scythians are important because later on I'm going to tell you that one of their sub-tribes called the Medes were actually involved in piracy. Piracy in the Arabian Sea. Now you can see the Arabian Sea is shown here, which is bordered by South Asian coastal areas, the Persian Gulf, the Arabian Peninsula. So this is the region where the pirates who had bases in Makran, Sindh, and Gujarat were raiding ships, trying to extract money. Actually, they were trying to extract the fees for the rights of passage through the Arabian Sea. And so the Scythians were scattered in this region, and they are semi-nomadic tribes. So this region where we live now used to be a very inhospitable region, and a lot of pirates were operating from here back in the day for quite a long time actually. So it was a lawless region which was not really in control of the Hindu Rajas. So we'll be covering a little bit about that. That will be the backdrop into Muhammad bin Qasim's entry into Sindh. So you can see here in this map, the Persian Gulf is shown, Arabian Gulf is shown. You can see, do you see these red dotted lines that are coming from Italy? This is the trade routes that was used, the sea trade, maritime trade route, which came from Europe, and it touched upon the Arab countries, the Arabian Peninsula, North Africa, then went through the Indian Ocean all the way to India and Ceylon. Ceylon is Sri Lanka. And you can see there's a concentration of cities here on the South Indian coast. See, so many cities are concentrated next to each other. So this has been a very relatively busy area as far as trade and trade with sea merchants is concerned. It has been very busy from time immemorial, long time ago, thousands of years, has been a busy area doing trade. So trade contacts opened up Southern India to the outside world. So with that, let's go on to the next slide. Advent of Islam and the west coast of India. As I had shown you the map before, uh, and I'm going to show you another map later on, the Arab sea merchants, they were very seafaring and they would usually travel as far as Indonesia in the far east, and then on the way back they would make their stop in Ceylon, Sri Lanka, which is south of India. So actually, sorry, southeast of India, and then they would also make their stops in Malabar, Konkan, Gujarat, Sindh, sometimes in Sindh as well, but mostly in southern India. And then they would dock there. They would exchange with the locals. Um, they would bring dates and aromatic herbs, jari bootiya from different parts of the world, and then they would exchange with what the Indians have: coconuts, spices, uh, maybe silk, cotton, clothing, um, and other exotic things that were made in India. So they would trade with the locals, and the locals were very receptive. The people living on the Malabar and Konkan coast, they were very receptive to the Arabs, uh, in the sense that the Arabs didn't have to militarily make their way in South India. The South Indian natives, people who lived on the coastal regions of South India, they were aware of the Arab traders that they would come every year uh, around the monsoon season, because the Arab ships would take advantage of the monsoon winds to travel. That was very important. And the locals were ready to receive them. So the Arabs, when they stopped in South India, they were usually more welcomed as compared to uh, their entry into Sindh, which was basically a military invasion. As compared to that, in South India, they were here on a trade basis. They were trading with the locals, not a military expedition, and the locals were aware of the arrival of the Arabs and they were more welcoming. So much so that during the 7th century, uh, many Arabs, they settled in India on the South Indian coast, and they intermarried with the Indian women. And in Malabar, the Mapalis is a race who regard themselves as one of the first South Asians to have converted to Islam. And the Mapalis are usually the descendants of the Arab sea merchants, or they were locals who converted to Islam. So many of the Mapalis are part Arab and part Indian because of their ancestry, unique ancestry. Also, as you can see here, the Barwara Mosque in Gojgaha, Gujarat was built in 623. CE means Common Era. And the Chiraman Jumma Mosque in Kerala was built in 629 CE by Malik Dinar. These are one of the first two original first mosques of South Asia, located in South and southwestern India. So the Charaman Jumma Mosque is located in the Kerala state of India, Kerala state, which is a southernmost state located at the tip of India, southernmost southwestern India, Indian coastal state of Kerala. This was built by Malik Dinar, who is regarded as a disciple of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, disciple or companion of Prophet Muhammad, who I believe he actually settled in this region. If not, he came here regularly to trade. I'm going to show you a picture of this mosque, which looks like a very beautiful mosque. This is one of the first or the second mosques of South Asia, the whole South Asian subcontinent, which is a big thing. So I'm going to show you the picture of that, and I kind of like that mosque. All right, so then it goes on. It says when the governor of Bahrain went to Bharuch, which is located in Gujarat state. Gujarat state is an adjoining state to the state of Pakistani province of Sindh. It is attached east of Sindh in India. So he went to Bharuch in the 7th century CE. Then, as a result of his travels there, migrant Arab and Persian trading communities from southern Arabia and the Persian Gulf began settling in the coastal areas of Gujarat. So many people who are from Gujarat actually are descendants of those Arabs and Persians who settled there, who intermarried with the local Gujarati women. Alright, so it goes on. Islam arrived in North India in the 12th century via the Turkic invasions. Turkic are the people of Central Asia. They are commonly known as the Turkic tribes. Alright, so their entry into the subcontinent was an introduction of Islam in that region. So Islam came first in South India and southwestern India. However, it reached northern India and northwestern India a little bit late, as you can see here. Over the centuries, there has been a significant integration of Hindu and Muslim cultures across India, and Muslims have played a notable role in economics, politics, and culture of India. Okay, one more thing I want you to remember is that it's also given in your book by Mr. Kazmi that Islam was more readily accepted in southern on the southern Indian coastal regions because they had been trading with Arabs from even before Islam. Arabs had been traveling there on their ships to trade with Indians even before the advent of Islam. So, because of the previous history they had with the Arabs, they were more receptive to Arab influences. And Arabs previously practiced paganism, which was a little bit closer to Hinduism, and they practiced Sabaeanism, worship of stars, Sabaeanism, the worship of stars. So it's probably believed by historians that the native Indians had, because of the influence of Arabs, they had already accepted Sabaeanism and paganism before the advent of Islam. So when Islam came and the Muslims brought the new religion with them, it was more readily accepted because the previous influence had been accepted or because of the mutual exchange that was happening through trade and commerce. All right. So notice that difference because in the topic that we'll cover about entry into sin, the spread of Islam would be a little bit different from this. So let's go on to the next slide. Ladies and gentlemen, here is a map of South India. You can see here, let's start from the west. There is Gujarat at the corner, Indian state of Gujarat. Then there's the Konkan coast, and then south of that is the Malabar coast. On the southeastern Indian coastal region, we have the Coromandel coast, and all right, so Coromandel was also on the way of the Arab ships. However, they usually made most of their stops on Malabar and Konkan and Gujarat. And then at the bottom here we have Ceylon, Sri Lanka. Notice you take a look at this. You noticed inside the cone of South India, you will see the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats on the two extreme corners. These are the mountain ranges that trap the monsoon clouds, the monsoon rains, the monsoon moisture. So in this area it rains a lot, and these mountain ranges, which are very close to the coast, both the Coromandel and the Malabar coast, they trap the moisture, and that's why it's a very green area. And I'll show you the picture next. And you can see that it's so green that when the sea meets the coast, you'll see trees and trees, like lush green trees and a thicket of trees. So let's move on to the next slide. Ladies and gentlemen, here is a map of South India. You can see here, let's start from the west. There is Gujarat at the corner, Indian state of Gujarat. Then there's a Konkan coast, and then south of that is the Malabar coast. On the southeastern Indian coastal region, we have the Coromandel coast, and all right, so Coromandel was also on the way of the Arab ships. However, they usually made most of their stops on Malabar and Konkan and Gujarat. And then at the bottom here we have Ceylon, Sri Lanka. Notice you take a look at this. You noticed inside the cone of South India, you will see the Western Ghats and the Eastern Ghats on the two extreme corners. These are the mountain ranges that trap the monsoon clouds, the monsoon rains, the monsoon moisture. So in this area it rains a lot, and these mountain ranges, which are very close to the coast, both the Coromandel and the Malabar coast, they trap the moisture, and that's why it's a very green area. And I'll show you the picture next. And you can see that it's so green that when the sea meets the coast, you'll see trees and trees, like lush green trees and a thicket of trees. So let's move on to the next slide. In this picture, you can see the Charaman Juma Masjid in Mathala, Kerala, on the Malabar coast. Remember, Kerala is the state, it's the present Indian state where the Nepalis, one of the first people to convert to Islam in South Asia, the Nepalis used to live here, who claim that they are descendants of the Arab sea merchants. So see, it seems like a very simple and beautiful, elegant masjid, and I like the simplicity of this masjid. It's not too elaborate. Seems like a simple mosque, and it's one of the things that's on my to-do list. And maybe one day, if I get a chance, I'm going to go and visit. If I'm in Kerala, I'm going to go visit and maybe pray in this mosque. All right, let's move on to the next slide. In this picture, you can see the Charaman Juma Masjid in Mathala, Kerala, on the Malabar coast. Remember, Kerala is the state, it's the present Indian state where the Nepalis, one of the first people to convert to Islam in South Asia, the Nepalis used to live here, who claim that they are descendants of the Arab sea merchants. So see, it seems like a very simple and beautiful, elegant masjid, and I like the simplicity of this masjid. It's not too elaborate. Seems like a simple mosque, and it's one of the things that's on my to-do list. Maybe one day, if I get a chance, I'm going to go and visit. If I'm in Kerala, I'm going to go visit and maybe pray in this mosque. All right, let's move on to the next slide. In this picture, I have uh, I'm showing you the the Konkan coast. It's actually the Dobhal beach on the Konkan coast, which is a coastal region in southern India, just north of the Malabar coast. The reason I'm showing you this picture is because this is one of the first sites that Arab ships would see when they would approach the South Indian coastal regions. See, they are being welcomed by so many coconut and palm trees. It's a thicket of trees, and these trees, as you've barely left sea for the land, and you're covered by trees. It's so green. This is because the rain that gets trapped in this region, the monsoon precipitation that gets trapped, and this region gets a lot of rain every year. And the next thing these Arabs would see would be friendly, mostly for the most part, friendly native Indians who were welcoming and who were ready to trade with them. And Arabs used to actually spend weeks and months there before leaving because the monsoon season was a prolonged season. They would take advantage of the monsoon winds to travel, which was necessary because they only had the sail. They didn't have mechanized boats back then. So thought I should show you the picture. This is the site that you see when you're approaching on the sea towards India. This is the first site they would see. Arab-Indian interactions. There is much historical evidence to show that Arabs and Muslims interacted with Indians from the very early days of Islam, or even before the arrival of Islam in Arab regions. Arab traders transmitted the numeral system developed by Indians to the Middle East and Europe. Many Sanskrit books were translated into Arabic as early as the 8th century. Major Sanskrit texts began to be translated during the reign of the second Abbasid caliph al-Mansur, who ruled between 754 and 775. Alright, so if not before, some texts on logic even before that, and it had been generally accepted that the Persian and Sanskrit texts, few as they were indeed the first to be translated. They were translated into Arabic. Persian and Sanskrit books on different subjects were translated into Arabic, and this was made possible because of the contact Indian-Arab interactions that took place in South India. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Our Arab and Indian interactions continued here. Uh, this talks about the commercial exchange that took place between Arabs and the Indians, and it had been taking place since time immemorial, as I had discussed before, even before the arrival of Islam. For instance, the Arabs would bring dates and aromatic herbs, Khushbudar herbs, Jari Butian, to the Indian shores, which the Indians liked very much, and they would exchange what they had with the Arabs. So people living on the western coast were familiar with the arrival of the Arabs as the flock of birds that came in monsoon. However, whereas monsoon birds flew back to Africa after a sojourn of few months, sojourn is a small time period spent of a few months, not all traders returned to their homes in the desert. Many married Indian women and settled in India. If they liked India and the locals were friendly and welcoming. They stayed there and they built mosques there and they uh, set their roots in India. And some communities came up which were as a result of the intermarriages that happened between Arabs and Indians. So the same merchants, after the advent of Islam, they brought the Islamic faith to this region. And as I had explained before, because the South Indians were very receptive of the Arabs, they were allowed to marry the Indian women. They were allowed to marry their mosques and be comfortable in this region in any way possible. So that's why many of them decided to settle, and the land was very fertile, good for farming. Many of them owned farms, and they had a domesticated life in South India. Rather than going back to Arabia, they decided to stay there or stay there temporarily and then move about. Because at that time, the Arabs were the masters of the sea. And there was also some Muslim missionary activity in this region. And what really helped was that the king of Malabar, the great king of Malabar, he converted to Islam. And when the king converts, the king's subjects also follow suit. So when the king converted, his subjects also converted. So a lot of conversions happened, multiple conversions happened, exponential growth. Now let's talk about Arab Muslim entry into Sindh. I'm going to give you a small backdrop before leading on to this topic. As I had shown you on the map, the Scythians were living in the region where Bin Qasim would make an entry. So their sub-tribe, the Meds, as I had explained before, were involved in piracy, and they were also very seafaring. They had ships that were very mobile, and they would raid ships and they would try to extract a fee for the rights of passage through the Indian Ocean. And if somebody failed to pay those fees, then they would raid those ships. They would not allow them to have safe, free passage through the seas. So the Meds are very seafaring and they're very independent. They're not in control of the ruler, as we will see later on. So what had happened was in AD, that means what? Anno Domini. See, AD comes before the date. AD, Anno Domini. That means in the year of the Lord, since Christ was born. Anno Domini. It's a Latin word. AD 710. In AD 710, an Arab ship traveling from Ceylon, which is Sri Lanka, to Arabia, laden with goods, including gifts for the Caliph Walid I. Caliph Walid I was the Muslim caliph who is the Umayyad Caliph. He's ruling the Muslim world. So the king of Ceylon was on good terms with the Caliph, and he sent him gifts on this expedition. However, the pirates raided that ship, kidnapped their passengers, took them prisoners. They looted the ship. However, the leader of the expedition actually, luckily, he escaped from the pirates, and he returns back to the Caliph and he explains what befell the ship. So this was a very bad situation and it was unbearable. And what added to the grief was the fact that the gifts meant for Caliph Walid I were also stolen. So it was very important that somebody had to take it upon themselves to go ahead and negotiate with the Hindu rulers of Sindh so that those pirates could be apprehended. However, when Hajjaj bin Yusuf, governor of Eastern Muslim Empire, tried to negotiate and contact Raja Dahir, who was the ruler of Sindh and southern Punjab, Dahir simply explained that he had no control over the piracy originating from Makrans in Gujarat. He had no control over it. That's what he said. So, sorry, I have no control over this. I can't help you. If I had control over this, I would have clamped it. That's what Raja Dahir said. So, unconvinced, Hajjaj bin Yusuf deputes his nephew, Muhammad bin Qasim, who's a young lad, probably 17 years old, but he's very trustworthy. He's very mature for his age. He is a good fighter, a good warrior. He has proved himself to be a good leader in the past. He is given the responsibility of undertaking a major military expedition, which is supposed to travel from Iraq to through Persia. The land forces are going to travel from Iraq through Persia into Makran, Balochistan, and Sindh. Their mission is to eradicate or clamp down upon the pirates, the Meds that are freely operating from the Makran, Sindh, and Gujarat coasts. So this was the initial mission of bin Qasim. All right, so let's go on to the next slide. Students, here is a map, an old map, which has cities which some of which don't exist anymore, old names of cities, which shows the domain that Muhammad bin Qasim had tried to conquer when he entered the region, present-day region of Pakistan. So you can see he tried to take over Makran in the west. Daibur is very close to Karachi. This probably was the headquarters of the Meds, the sea pirates. And then mostly he went up north through the Indus River. He went north very close to the river. The reason being that he had a naval expedition with him, which was supposed to provide cover to the land forces led by Ben Qasim. So there was a naval expedition and a land force. All right, so they would put all the equipment on the ships and they would move them upstream on the Indus River. So this is the region. The region shown in green is the area that bin Qasim conquered. However, very soon afterwards, he did lose control of some of the lands. The local leaders tried to reassert themselves afterwards. So he went as far north as Multan and even a little bit further north. And that's it. Then he was recalled. He was called back by the new Khalifa, Caliph. So it says the caption here is Extent and Expansion of Umayyad Rule under Muhammad bin Qasim in Medieval India. Modern international boundaries shown in red. So bin Qasim's expeditionary force consisted of 6,000 horsemen and another 6,000 camel-mounted soldiers, with a naval fleet that left at a different time from Basra, Iraq. Basra is a port city of Iraq in southern Iraq to assist the land army. The naval expedition was carrying some catapults with them. Some of them were so big that it needed about 500 people to control it. One of the famous catapults was called Urus, which means bride in Arabic. Catapult looks like an arm, like a big arm that throws fire or stones over the walls of a fortified city. That's a catapult. So they were very heavy, needed 500 people. Some of them, the larger ones, needed 500 people to operate them. So they were very effective. And I'll show you in one of the wars to take over Daibor, a catapult was used effectively with effectiveness. All right, so the expeditionary land army first took Makran because Makran is the first place that comes. in the west. They were arriving from the west going towards the east. So they took Makaran, the area of Makaran first, then Arambil, which is known as Las Bela. At this point, bin Qasim was joined by Arab forces who had remained unsuccessful in defeating Raja Tahir in previous engagements, so they also joined bin Qasim. This combined force marched on to Daibol, located in the Indus River Delta. Delta is a region where the river it's like a flat land between where the river sort of branches off. Flat land, that's a delta. Here the land army was met by the naval fleet. That was quite a coincidence. When bin Qasim arrived in Daibol, which is a big city, fortified city, the naval fleet also reached the same place. It was a coincidence because the naval fleet had left on a different it had a different agenda. It left from Basra, however, at a different speed compared to the land forces, but they arrived there at the same time, which was quite a coincidence. It was helpful for bin Qasim actually to win control of Daibor. Had the naval fleet not arrived on time, maybe he might have had a delayed victory in Daibor. Maybe not. We'll never know. However, uh, he lays siege on Daibor, and Daibor was since it's a fortified city. What had happened was the main temple of Daibor had raised a red flag, and sources informed bin Qasim that people from within who were not happy with the Hindu rulers, because the city was mostly had a population of Buddhist and lower caste Hindus, they were not satisfied with the way they were being treated by the ruler. So they saw some of them sort of they wanted to side with they wanted a second option. So when bin Qasim arrived, they sort of felt that he would be a better option than the present ruler. So they decided to support him. So they provided information saying that the major temple, which had a red flag, and you could see the red flag from far away, the elders of the town believed that as long as the red flag was flying high, nobody could overrun this city. So bin Qasim, when he came to know of this information, he used his catapult, the Urus. He shortened the arm of the catapult and threw a big boulder towards the flag, took off the flag. And when the flag was no more, then the morale of the locals they broke down, and it was easier for him to take up the city, to occupy the city. However, apart from this, it is very well known that bin Qasim showed a lot of sympathy and mercy towards the locals, and this was something that was made an impression on the Buddhists and the lower caste Hindus who readily joined him. Next, he moved north and took up the city of Narun in Sindh, near the present-day city of Hyderabad. So the old name of Hyderabad was Narun, and it was basically a Buddhist populated city. They were disgruntled by the ruler, who was the son of Raja Tahir, not happy with him. So they welcomed the invading Arab army, submitted to bin Qasim. They arranged back for the badly needed supplies for the Arab troops and fodder, uh, busa for the war animals. Busa meaning food for them. Next, bin Qasim's army advanced further north, laying siege to another Sindhi city of Sehwan. After gaining control of the city, bin Qasim organized its administration. As a result of bin Qasim's victories, several local rulers and governors voluntarily pledged allegiance to bin Qasim. So they decided to join him because he is the victor. They said, okay, let's join the victorious party. Moving on to Multan. For several months, the Arab troops tried unsuccessfully to break through the walls of Multan fort. It was a fortified city, and they tried to break through the walls with their catapults, which they had loaded on their ships, and they were taking it upstream on the Indus River. When the water supply to the city was cut off, only then did the Multanis capitulate. Capitulate means they surrendered or gave up, gave in. Following this victory, bin Qasim sent some of his troops towards the Kashmiri-held fortresses on the Jhelum River. A Kashmiri dynasty had control over this region. So he sent some of his troops to uh, as far as the Jhelum River to confront the Kashmiris, and other troops towards the border of the kingdom of Kannauj in northern India, the famous kingdom of Kannauj in northern India. Alright, summary of Arab invasions of Sindh and Multan. I thought this was a nice picture in the background. Arabs engaged in warfare. The Umayyad interest in the region was galvanized by the operation of the Meds, a tribe of the Scythians living in Sindh and others. Meds had engaged in piracy on Sassanid shipping in the past. Sassanids were the Persians, the Persian Empire. So Persian ships had also been a victim of Med piracy in the past. And these pirates, they actually operated from the Tigris River, which is in Iraq, to the west till Sri Lanka, till the Sri Lankan coast, which is a very large area. So they had piracy. They were engaged in piracy over a very large area. That's what I'm trying to emphasize. And now they were preying on Arab ships from bases at Kuch, Jaibol, and Kathiawar. Kathiawar and Kuch are located in the present Indian state of Gujarat. Jaibol is in Sindh. Sindh was a wild frontier of Al-Hind, inhabited mostly by semi-nomadic tribes whose activities disturbed much of the western Indian Ocean. Point number two. During Hajjaj bin Yusuf's governorship, the Mads of Jaibol raided a ship carrying present gifts sent by the king of Ceylon, Sri Lanka, and kidnapping its human cargo. The incident gave momentum to the need for the subjugation of the coastal areas of Makran, Balochistan, and Sindh. Point number three. Muhammad bin Qasim, an Arab commander, led the conquest of Sindh and Multan starting in AD 711, Anno Domini 711, mainly for the purpose of defeating the menace of piracy coming from the coast of Sindh. Point number four. This event happened during the Khilafat of Caliph Walid I. In the bracket it says R dot, which is an abbreviation of rule between 705 and 711. This is the period when he ruled the Muslim world. The section on concluding questions for part 1 of this lecture. Well, we discussed the entry of Islam via South Indian coastal regions and the coast of Sindh and Makran. So think about those two entry routes. Which of the two routes of entry would you consider as peaceful? Without a show of force, which one was peaceful? Think about that for a second. I'm going to give you a few seconds to think about it. I'm sure many of you already know the answer. However, I'm going to explain that as I had discussed before, we discussed two entry routes. One via southern Indian coast of Malabar, Konkan, and the other was via Sindh and Makran. The first route was a more peaceful route. Shipping expeditions, sea merchants were trading with southern Indians, Arab sea merchants were trading with South Indians of Malabar and Konkan, which was a more peaceful exchange of goods, and they had established good commercial ties, which helped in the spread of Sabianism uh, before Islam, paganism before Islam, and then later on when Islam came through the Arabs, it was readily accepted because Arabs had already established good relations with the South Indians on peaceful trade terms, and Arabs were already settling in this region, intermarrying. I had discussed all that. So this was more of a peaceful. So as compared to the invasion of Sindh and Makran, the entry of Arabs to South India was more peaceful. South Indians were more accepting of Arabs. Remember that. Remember this thing because this is a little bit related to your midterm. You might be asked a question on this. So please remember this part. Question number two, what was explained by our teacher as a factor in the acceptance of Islam by the coastal inhabitants of South India? Well, it's related to the first question, and I had already said it, but let me be more specific here. Uh, the fact that trade and commercial ties had been established already, even before Islam, in this region, in the South Indian region, South Indian coastal areas by the seafaring Arab sea merchants. This fact helped later on helped when Islam came and was brought by the Arabs to this region. So it was more accepted by the locals without a show of force. Without a show of force. See, in Sindh and Makran, they had to show force. But as but over here, it was more of a trade and then influence to trade and then uh, trying to proselytize the locals, mean preach the locals, which was also peaceful. There was not much opposition. Question number three: if removing piracy off the coast of Sindh and Makran was a factor in bin Qasim's military adventures, why did he continue marching on to Multan in the north? Yeah, that makes sense. I've thought about that. If the only reason, which actually in the beginning that was the only reason, was to eradicate or clamp down on piracy, punish the pirates so that they wouldn't harass the ships on the Indian Ocean. So, well, if they had accomplished that mission, which for which we had no information actually, there was no information. We just hear about in the books of history. We hear that bin Qasim entered Sindh and Makran because of that purpose to eradicate piracy. However, we never hear that pirates were actually defeated or piracy was eradicated or whatnot. However, we do hear that he kept on going north and a lot of cities they capitulated, they gave in, and many of the people converted to Islam, which is a good thing, but we never hear about the piracy. So think about that and what would have made him go north rather than just focus on defeating the pirates which were on the coastal area. So he decided to go north. Think about that. I'm going to give you a few seconds. Well, there could be many reasons, but what I can think of, if you are young, you're a leader of an army, you might want to go and explore and go north and maybe capture land, treasures. He could be attracted by those things. Maybe, we don't know. And maybe the prospect of, you know, exploring new areas, maybe spreading Islam, spreading the new religion. That would be the motivating factor. Maybe marrying women, you know, you never know. These were young men and they didn't come with women. Uh, it was all a man army. It could be different reasons. So you can think of several reasons. This is an open question. You can think of several reasons. All right. So you can imagine and think and answer this question. Once again, if you want to share your answers with me, you're welcome to do that. You can message me on Google Classroom or you can write me an email and then you can apprise me with your answers. Additional readings, Kazmi MR 2007, Chapter 1, Muslim Society in South Asia, in Pakistan Studies, pages 9 to 12. Please do read that It's very interesting chapter one, only a few pages, and that's it. An important announcement. Dear students, if you follow the syllabus, you will notice that the topic People and Land has a third component, that is location and geophysical features. My original intention was to cover this topic after concluding Advent of Muslims. However, I realized that since this new topic is more detailed, it would be more proper to dedicate a whole lecture session to it rather than merging the two topics here. Secondly, squeezing so much information in one lecture session is not a judicious, wise teaching practice. Please pardon my decision to move this topic to my next lecture session to be held during the last month of the semester. It has been a great pleasure teaching this course. Hopefully, our final sessions will be in class if man overcame the ravages of this pandemic through a vaccine. Well, even I know the vaccine trials are still happening and the university is opening September the 15th. So we still have to be careful and follow the SOPs. So this lecture was once again, uh, I would like to inform you that this lecture was supposed to be on the third week of class, but because I was ill and I'm still recovering, I couldn't complete this lecture back then during the third week. So I am going to uh, upload this lecture on Google Classroom, and then later on when I'll convert it to MP4, I will ask the IT department to have it uploaded on the website as an MP4 video. So I apologize for any convenience that you may have faced because this lecture was delayed, but unfortunately I was not well and I'm still not well, but getting better with the grace of Allah. And then later on, I'm hoping that the last four lessons would be covered by me, Syed Abbas Mehdi, in class, according if you follow the schedule. So I'll be covering next the location and geophysical features and other aspects of Pakistan's geography, industry, and other interesting topics. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for following this lecture. Have a good day.